The training grounds of Ironcliff Arena were never quiet. Even before sunrise, the air shook with the clang of metal, the hiss of steam rising from scorched stone, and the deep, impatient growls of young battle dragons waiting to be tested. The arena had been carved into the side of a black mountain centuries ago, its walls permanently stained by fire and blood. For the nobles watching from above, it was a place of entertainment and power. For the trainers, it was a proving ground. For the dragons, it was a cage disguised as destiny. On this particular morning, the crowd was larger than usual. Rumors had spread of a newly bred battle dragon, young, fast-growing, and unusually resilient. The nobles leaned forward in their seats, jeweled rings flashing as they whispered bets. Trainers straightened their uniforms, eager to impress. At the center of it all stood Varek, one of Ironcliff's most celebrated dragon handlers. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore his confidence like armor. His grin was sharp, practiced, and full of certainty. Dragons obeyed him. They always had. Near the far edge of the arena, almost hidden behind stacked water barrels and ash carts, sat a small human girl. Her name was Alara, though almost no one ever used it. She was an orphan of no known origin, assigned menial work, sweeping scorched floors, carrying buckets, scrubbing claw marks from stone. She wore clothes patched so many times the original fabric was barely visible. Soot stained her fingers no matter how often she washed them. To the people of Ironcliff, she was part of the background, as unremarkable as dust. Alara had finished her morning tasks early and sat quietly, knees drawn to her chest, watching from a distance. She always watched. Dragons fascinated her. Not for their size or fire, but for the sadness she thought she sometimes saw in their eyes when no one was paying attention. She never dared approach them. She knew better. Dragons were weapons here, and weapons did not belong to children like her. A horn sounded, long and low, echoing off the stone walls. The crowd hushed. Heavy gates at the far end of the arena began to rise, chains grinding loudly as heat rolled outward like a living thing. From the shadows emerged the young battle dragon. It was larger than Alara had expected. Not fully grown, but already massive, its scales a deep charcoal gray that shimmered faintly like metal under torchlight. Its wings were folded tight against its body, muscles rippling beneath thick armor-like skin. Faint scars marked its neck and shoulders, early lessons harshly taught. Its eyes, bright and alert, scanned the arena with sharp intelligence. Varek stepped forward confidently, whip coiled at his side, control runes glowing faintly along his gauntlet. "Behold," he announced, his voice carrying easily across the arena. A creature forged for battle. Strength, obedience, and fire. Everything a kingdom needs. The dragon let out a low rumble, not quite a roar. The sound vibrated through the stone beneath Alara's feet, sending a shiver up her spine. Targets were released, moving constructs shaped like armored soldiers. At Varek's signal, the dragon was supposed to charge, to incinerate them in a display of dominance and precision. The crowd waited eagerly, but the dragon did not move. Varek frowned slightly, then snapped a command word. The runes flared brighter. Still, the dragon remained still, its head tilted as if listening to something no one else could hear. Murmurs spread through the stands. "Move," Varek hissed, cracking the whip sharply against the stone. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The dragon finally took a step, not toward the targets. Turned. Slowly, deliberately, it pivoted its massive body away from Varek and the center of the arena. Its claws scraped against stone as it began walking. Not charging, not stalking, but simply walking. Chains slipped loose from their anchors, clattering uselessly behind it. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Trainers shouted warnings. Guards tightened their grips on spears. Alara's breath caught in her throat as the dragon's gaze passed over soldiers, nobles, and weapons, until it landed on her. She froze. The dragon's eyes locked onto the small girl sitting alone by the ash carts. Something shifted in its expression, a subtle softening that no one could quite explain. With heavy, measured steps, it continued forward. "Alara, move!" someone shouted, though she wasn't sure who. Her body refused to respond. Fear rooted her in place as the dragon approached, each step shaking the ground. She expected pain, fire, or death. That was what dragons brought here. Instead, the dragon stopped beside her. The arena fell completely silent. Slowly, almost carefully, the dragon folded its wings inward. Its massive body lowered, and with a final, gentle movement that seemed impossible for a creature of its size, it sat down next to Alara. Its tail curved slightly around her, not trapping her, but shielding her from the open arena. Varric's confident grin vanished. His face drained of color as disbelief twisted his features. "No," he muttered, then louder, "Get away from her. Now." The dragon did not react. Alara could feel the heat radiating from its scales, warm but not painful. She stared up at the enormous creature, tears blurring her vision. His breathing was slow, steady. One massive eye turned toward her, filled not with aggression, but something unbearably familiar. Loneliness. Without fully understanding why, Alara raised a trembling hand and rested it against the dragon's side. The scale beneath her palm was smooth and warm, pulsing faintly with life. The dragon exhaled softly, a sound almost like relief. Around them, the world seemed to stop. Varric took a step back, fear finally breaking through his authority. He had trained dragons for years, broken them, shaped them, but he had never seen one choose. And in that moment, as a battle dragon sat quietly beside a forgotten human girl, the rules of Ironcliff Arena began to crack. For several heartbeats, no one in Ironcliff Arena dared to move. The silence was heavier than any roar the dragons had ever produced. Soldiers stood frozen with spears half-raised. Nobles leaned forward, forgetting their wagers, their expressions caught between awe and fear. A battle dragon was not supposed to sit peacefully beside a human child. It was not supposed to choose anything at all. Varric was the first to recover. Anger rushed in to replace his shock, hot and sharp, because confusion made him feel weak. "This is a trick," he snapped, turning toward the officials on the upper platform. "Something is wrong with the creature. It's defective." The dragon's head lifted slightly at the sound of Varric's voice. A low growl vibrated through its chest. Not loud, not violent, but unmistakably warning. The sound alone forced several guards to take a step back. Alara felt it too, the growl echoing against her ribs. Her instinct told her to pull her hand away, to curl into herself and disappear like she always did when adults shouted. Yet she didn't. Her fingers stayed pressed against the warm scales, and something inside her steadied. The fear was still there, but it no longer ruled her. "I didn't do anything," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was speaking to. "I'm sorry." The dragon shifted, angling its body slightly closer to her, blocking the line of sight between Alara and the trainers. Heat shimmered faintly around its shoulders, reacting to the tension in the air. "This is unacceptable," one of the nobles barked. "Remove the girl. Kill the dragon if you must." Several soldiers hesitated. Killing a battle dragon was no small thing, especially one that hadn't attacked. Orders like that carried consequences. Varric raised his gauntlet arm, the control runes blazing bright red. "Enough," he growled. "You belong to me." He spoke the binding command, a word etched deep into the dragon's training, reinforced by pain and repetition. In the past, that word had always worked. Dragons flinched, bowed, obeyed. This time, the dragon stiffened, but it did not submit. Its breathing grew heavier. Alara felt a strange pressure in her chest, like emotions that weren't her own pressing outward. Fear, anger, exhaustion, and beneath all of it, a deep, aching need to be left alone. The dragon shook its head violently, as if trying to dislodge something invisible. The runes along Varric's arm flickered. "No," Varric muttered, panic creeping into his voice. He increased the output, pushing harder, teeth clenched. "Obey!" Alara gasped as the dragon let out a sharp, pained sound. Without thinking, she wrapped both arms around its foreleg, small and fragile against its massive limb. "Please!" she said, her voice breaking. Stop hurting it. The words were soft, unimportant. No one would have listened to her. But the dragon did. The pain eased. The shaking slowed. The control runes dimmed suddenly, like embers smothered by ash. Varric stumbled backward, staring at his gauntlet as if it had betrayed him. That's impossible, he whispered. High above, an elderly scholar rose slowly from his seat. He had been quiet for years, dismissed as outdated, tolerated only because of his past contributions. His voice, when he spoke, trembled, but it carried. Perhaps, he said carefully, we are witnessing something we chose to forget. All eyes turned to him. There are old records, the scholar continued, from before dragons were broken into weapons, accounts of rare bonds, not forged through force but formed through recognition. Dragons that responded not to dominance, but to presence. Murmurs spread through the stands. The idea was uncomfortable, dangerous. Varric rounded on him. Fairy tales, he spat. Dragons are tools. At that, the dragon lifted its head fully and released a deep, resonant sound that rolled through the arena like distant thunder. Flames flickered briefly along its throat. Not erupting, not striking. Just existing, controlled and deliberate. The message was clear. Alara slowly loosened her grip, though she stayed close. Her heart was pounding, but a strange clarity filled her mind. She wasn't special. She hadn't cast a spell or done anything clever. She had only been there, quiet and honest, the way she always was. Why me? She whispered, barely audible. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she felt it. Not a voice, not words, but understanding. The dragon's attention was gentle, almost curious. It sensed no hunger for power in her, no desire to control or impress. Only someone who saw it as something more than a weapon. Tears slipped down Alara's cheeks before she realized she was crying. The commander of Ironcliff descended from the platform, his expression hard but uncertain. He studied the dragon, then the girl, then the terrified trainer. We cannot execute a creature that refuses to be controlled, he said slowly. Nor can we ignore this. Varric opened his mouth to argue, but no words came. For the first time in his career, he had no authority here. The commander turned to Alara. Can you make it move? Her stomach twisted. She shook her head at first, then hesitated. She looked up at the dragon, her hand resting lightly against its leg. I can ask, she said quietly. She stood, legs shaking, and stepped just in front of the dragon. The arena seemed to hold its breath. Can you stand? She asked, her voice soft, unsure. The dragon rose. Smoothly, calmly, without threat. A wave of stunned silence followed. Alara felt something shift around her. Not in the air, but in how people looked at her. She was no longer invisible. And as the dragon lowered its head slightly toward her, the truth settled in. Whatever had begun here could not be undone. The arena, the trainers, the entire system had been built on fear. Now fear had met trust, and it did not know how to survive it. The moment the dragon stood at Alara's simple request, Ironcliff Arena stopped being a place of certainty. It became something unstable. The commander stared at the towering creature, calculating risk against opportunity. Around him, nobles whispered urgently, some demanding immediate destruction, others seeing potential glory. A dragon that obeyed without runes or whips could become the greatest asset the kingdom had ever known, or the most dangerous threat. Varric, however, saw only humiliation. This is temporary, he insisted, voice tight with desperation. The control bindings are weakened, that's all. Give me time and I'll reassert dominance. The dragon's wings flexed at the word dominance, the air stirring with restrained power. Alara sensed the shift instantly. The calm she had felt was thinning, replaced by alert tension. Not aggression, defense. She stepped closer to the dragon's side again, her presence grounding it. Don't hurt it, she said, louder this time. Her voice echoed faintly against stone. The commander's gaze narrowed. Girl, he said carefully. If this creature loses control, hundreds could die. Can you guarantee it won't? Alara swallowed. She had no training, no rank, no authority. But she looked up at the dragon's massive eye and saw clarity there, not chaos. "It doesn't want to hurt anyone," she replied. "It just doesn't want to be forced." The simplicity of her answer unsettled the arena more than any roar could have. To test her claim, the commander signaled for one of the moving combat constructs to be activated again. The metal figure clanked forward, sword arm raised, glowing with defensive enchantments. "Ask it to attack," he ordered. Alara hesitated. She felt the dragon's awareness brush against her. Curious, waiting. "You don't have to destroy it," she murmured softly. "Just stop it." The dragon moved, not with wild fury, but with controlled precision. It stepped forward, wings partially spread for balance. As the construct lunged, the dragon sidestepped with surprising agility and struck, not with flame, but with a calculated sweep of its tail. The construct shattered against the arena wall, disabled but not melted into slag. Gasps erupted from the stands. The dragon could have incinerated it. Everyone knew that. Instead, it had chosen restraint. Varric's jaw tightened. His authority was dissolving with every second this continued. "It's pretending," he snapped. "Dragons are born for conquest." The elderly scholar descended slowly from the platform, eyes shining with something close to vindication. "No," he said quietly. "They are born powerful. What they become depends on what we demand of them." The dragon turned its head slightly toward the scholar, as if acknowledging the truth in his words. The commander studied Alara carefully now. "What do you feel when you stand near it?" he asked. She searched for the right answer. "It's loud," she admitted. "Not in sound, in feelings. There's anger, yes, but mostly exhaustion, like it's been fighting something for a long time." Several trainers shifted uncomfortably. The dragon lowered its head again, bringing its massive snout near Alara's shoulder without touching her. The gesture was deliberate, protective. A sudden sharp command rang out from Varric as he activated a secondary control device hidden beneath his sleeve, a failsafe designed for emergencies. A pulse of energy shot toward the dragon. The reaction was immediate. The dragon reared back, releasing a thunderous roar that shook dust from the stone walls. Flames burst upward, not toward the crowd, but straight into the sky, a column of fire that split the air with blinding intensity. Panic erupted. Nobles ducked. Guards raised shields. Alara stumbled but didn't run. "Stop!" she cried, turning toward the dragon. "It's okay. You're safe." The fire diminished gradually, fading into smoke. The dragon's chest heaved, but it did not lash out. Its eyes locked onto Alara, searching, steadying. The commander rounded on Varric, fury blazing. "Stand down. You will not provoke it again." Varric lowered his arms slowly, realization dawning too late. He had lost control not just of the dragon but of the narrative. Silence returned, thicker than before. In that stillness, something subtle yet undeniable shifted across the arena. The soldiers no longer saw a mindless beast. The nobles no longer saw only spectacle. They had witnessed choice, discipline without cruelty. The commander faced the crowd. "From this moment," he declared, "this dragon will not be treated as a weapon under whip command." Murmurs exploded in protest. He raised a hand. "It will be evaluated under new supervision. And the girl," his gaze settled on Alara, "will remain at its side." Shock rippled outward again. Alara blinked, stunned. "Me? You appear to be the only one it listens to," he replied. The dragon shifted closer to her, its wing lowering slightly as if forming a barrier against the world. For the first time in her life, Alara did not feel small. Around them, Ironcliff Arena, once defined by dominance and fear, stood uncertain. The chains hanging from the gates seemed heavier now, outdated. Trainers avoided meeting each other's eyes. The scholar looked almost relieved. Varric, stripped of certainty, stepped backward into the shadows. And at the center of it all stood a quiet orphan and a battle dragon who had refused to bow. The old order had not fallen completely, but it had cracked. and everyone could see the fracture spreading. The days that followed felt unreal to everyone within Ironcliff Arena. Routine had once ruled the grounds with rigid certainty. Chains secured at dawn, drills executed at noon, punishments delivered before dusk. Now hesitation lingered in every corridor. Trainers who once barked commands found themselves speaking more carefully. Guards watched not with dominance, but with caution. The system had not collapsed, but it no longer stood unchallenged. At the center of this quiet upheaval stood Alara and the young dragon. The creature had been relocated to a larger enclosure near the arena's eastern wall, a space previously reserved for high-ranking war beasts. Unlike the others, its chains remained unlocked. They were present, yes, but unused. That alone unsettled many. Alara was given clean clothes, proper meals, and a small chamber nearby. The sudden shift in how people treated her felt disorienting. Servants who once ignored her now bowed their heads slightly when passing. Soldiers no longer barked at her to move aside. She didn't know what to do with the attention. But none of that mattered when she stepped into the dragon's enclosure. The moment she entered, the massive creature would lift its head from wherever it rested. Not with impatience, not with demand, simply awareness. She had chosen a name for it quietly on the second evening. Ashrin, she had whispered, testing how it felt. The dragon had blinked slowly and exhaled a warm breath that stirred her hair. It had accepted. Training resumed under new conditions, overseen directly by the commander and the elderly scholar. No whips, no rune activation. Instead, they observed. Alara did not issue sharp commands. She spoke normally, sometimes even uncertainly. When she asked Ashrin to move, the dragon moved. When she asked it to wait, it waited. The connection between them was not loud or dramatic. It was steady. During controlled combat trials, Ashrin demonstrated something none of the other dragons had ever shown: measured force. It disabled targets without unnecessary destruction. It reacted swiftly to threats but withdrew the instant Alara signaled calm. The precision stunned seasoned warriors. Efficiency without frenzy, the scholar murmured during one session. Remarkable. Other dragons began to behave differently as well. It started subtly. One refused to advance until its handler lowered his voice. Another hesitated before responding to pain-based commands. The trainers grew uneasy. Something invisible was spreading through the arena. Not rebellion, but awareness. Varric watched from a distance, bitterness etched into every movement. He had been officially removed from primary command duties, reassigned to minor tasks. His pride had suffered more than his rank. One afternoon, unable to tolerate the change any longer, he confronted Alara near Ashrin's enclosure. "You think this will last?" he said coldly. "Compassion doesn't win wars." Alara met his gaze without shrinking. That alone surprised him. "I don't think fear wins them either," she replied quietly. Ashrin shifted behind her, not threatening, but present. Varric hesitated, then turned away without another word. The transformation of Ironcliff did not happen overnight. Resistance remained. Some nobles withdrew funding. A few trainers resigned rather than adapt. But results spoke louder than tradition. In a regional military demonstration weeks later, Ashrin and Alara were presented before allied commanders. Instead of overwhelming destruction, they showcased coordination. Ashrin navigated complex obstacle courses with fluid grace, responding to minimal cues. When faced with simulated ambushes, it shielded allied units instead of charging blindly. Whispers traveled quickly across kingdoms. A dragon that protected rather than dominated. A human partner without noble blood. A bond without control magic. Back at Ironcliff, changes became policy. Rune-based pain enforcement was restricted. Young dragons were evaluated for temperament rather than broken immediately. The chains still existed, but their purpose was reconsidered. Alara remained humble despite the attention. In private moments, she still sat beside Ashrin the way she had on that first day, knees drawn close, palm resting against warm scales. The difference now was that she was no longer invisible. "You could leave," the commander told her once. You've earned position and protection anywhere in the capital. Alara looked at Ashrin, who watched her quietly. I already have what I need, she answered. Ashrin lowered its head gently until its brow nearly touched hers, a gesture no one had ever trained it to perform. Ironcliff Arena no longer echoed solely with the sound of domination. Carried something unfamiliar now: balance. Not every dragon formed such a bond. Not every trainer adapted easily. Conflict still existed beyond the mountain walls. The world had not become gentle, but it had changed. All because one battle dragon, bred for conquest, had walked away from expectation. All because a quiet girl had reached out instead of recoiling. Power had once meant control. Now, within those scorched stone walls, it meant something stronger. Choice.